My husband and I found our daughter overdosed in her bedroom downstairs. She was, for all intents and purposes, dead. The stigma of heroin addiction is terrible. Who can you tell that to? I couldn't tell my neighbor that I'd have coffee with that my daughter was addicted to heroin, that, you know, she put a needle in her arm and chewed up. You cannot tell that to anybody. It was a big secret we kept for a long time, a long time.
You know, some people might think it's crazy, but you know something? I don't think anybody in this room would wish this on anyone.
Joanne Peterson is the founder and executive director of Learn to Cope. Started in 2004 for family members who have a child or sibling addicted to opiates and other drugs, with the focus on coping with the danger and the stress and emotions related to addiction.
This creeps under people's front doorways like a mist. No family sees it coming. So we as a society need to recognize the signs and the symptoms, because the end result is frightening.
Heroin and OxyContin use and addiction is out of control. This is a silent epidemic that most people do not realize exists in just about every town in Massachusetts.
For the last few years, Massachusetts has classified the heroin and opiate overdose and use as an epidemic.
I'd say heroin's prevalent out there. It really is. It's something that we see on a day-to-day basis. Heroin's more available right now, I would say, to the kids than a six-pack of beer. That's a problem.
Day and night, it was really easy to get a hold of. I never had problems finding them within minutes all the time if I wanted one. I basically have bought heroin in every South Shore community, from Hanson to Pembroke to Braintree. I remember when I got my first sponsor in my program, she had told me to stay away from places I bought drugs, and she asked me where I bought drugs, and like every nook and cranny of the South Shore, my dealers went.
It was harder to avoid it than it was to find it. I mean, but doing OxyContins was a lot more socially acceptable. I could do it out with like all the people from high school. I'd be sitting in my bedroom by myself, or I'd be over like my one or two people that you would call friends sitting in their basement, or I'd be, you know, driving around in my car by myself, all geeked out with nowhere to go, and, you know, just basically miserable.
There's a perception among youth that these drugs are safe because they were prescribed, and you know, they've been approved by somebody and the physician prescribed them, therefore they must be safe. And you know, they're as addicting as heroin.
I can sit in any parking lot in any area and sit back and watch a deal go down. So in around the midst of people shopping, doing whatever they might be doing, and people just don't see that. So, and it's not the typical family that you think, oh, this is they gotta come from bad families, they gotta come from tough, you know, they must be socioeconomically, there must be an issue, something. They're good people, they come from good families, and they make a mistake, and they're getting involved in something that's way over their head, and it's so prevalent right now that it's scary. Everybody has a tendency to think, not in my house, I'm doing everything right, I'm a good parent, and those things might all be right, but it still makes that 1 second, that one choice, and it will change their life forever.
She graduated and did a beautiful portfolio to get into art school. But what we didn't know was her senior year, 2001, she started to use OxyContin. The kids were experimenting with it, but they never knew they would be addicted. They never knew that it would make them sick if they stopped. By the time we found out about the OxyContin, my daughter was heading into her junior year of college. And she called me on my cell phone, and I was driving the car. I'll never forget it, and said that she had used heroin. And I didn't even know heroin was around. I mean, and who would use heroin? Heroin you had to use with a needle, didn't you? I mean, that's how completely caught off guard we were.
When I first started using like Oxycontins, it was more like a casual thing. I'd do it out at the parties, and I just do it on the weekends. And then as it got worse, you know, I'd be doing it during the week, and I'd do it in my bedroom. I'd do it in my car, wherever I was when I got my hands on what I wanted.
And addiction is really a full-time job in order to, one, get this illegal drug in the first place, but to be able to afford it. And so oftentimes they do things that they can't even imagine that they would do, and that is, you know, stealing from their family, lying to their families, and you know, and it's really a sad situation. And so I think you're right, families suffer.
You know, my addiction got to the point where I couldn't afford it anymore. I was, you know, became a liar, a cheat, and a thief just to get the fix, so I didn't get sick. And I had come out, and I had heard a lot about heroin, and I knew it was cheaper, and you know, I went right to heroin, and I never looked back.
People, you know, promise themselves when they wake up in the morning that they're no longer going to use. There is this tremendous drive to continue using, even though they know that it's doing themselves harm.
I remember the first time everybody was talking about OCs, and you got to try one, you have to try one. And I did end up trying one, and I hated it. It made me violently ill. All of a sudden, one day I was driving down the street, and I just had this tremendous urge to have that feeling again, even though it made me deathly ill.
It was about 2 years into her addiction, and I was just not doing very well. And one of her girlfriends actually called me on a night when I was particularly bummed out. And she knew someone else that Jen went to school with whose mom was a member. And she put me in touch with the mom, and the mom picked me up the next Monday, and I went, and I immediately felt better. Going into a room full of people and looking at them and knowing they felt exactly as I did, and they knew exactly how I felt, because there's so many different things going on as a parent over this.
I tell the story in our group of standing with the phone book and looking through a D for drug, A for addiction. I just had no idea where to turn.
It came out of a need and an identification of parents seeking services and not finding it, and finding out in alarming numbers that it didn't exist. So, you know, it broke my heart every time you'd get a call from a parent and you honestly had no program to refer them to.
We're not in control.
Learn to Cope provides informational resources to family members about the disease of addiction and on what to expect.
And LTC has done that for me, made me a lot stronger, and educated me and helped me to get to where our family is today.
You can learn something no matter what stage your child is in.
And the more we said no, the better I felt. Each
it
time.
was a shock to Jason when we started to say no.
But I learned how to say no here.
I mean, if you suspect he's lying, he is. I can't tell you any other way. He is.
And she wouldn't go get help. So I told her she could not stay. I would drive her to any detox or rehab she wanted, but she could not stay.
Because the longer it goes on, the sicker and more addicted they get. Their tolerance just goes up and up and up.
So, and he said, one time, because he was hurting. And I think it got him to do it because of the circumstances that surrounded his death.
Learn to Cope is a support organization for families. We're a place where people can safely go, even if it's just in the privacy of their own home, and just talk about their feelings and know that the person on the other end of that computer knows exactly how they feel.
And even my husband, who hasn't been to a meeting when things went south, he'd say, get on the board. What do they say? What do they tell you to do? Like, there's a manual, but he knows everyone's input will help us make the right decision on what to do.
Learn to Cope's website provides 24/7 support. 7 days a week, you could be on that website at 2 in the morning in crisis with a daughter or son missing, and you can post that and get real-time support right then and there.
So I think, going to a reputable source where you can join others who are suffering from the same issues is incredibly helpful.
She still struggles, but we are learning to cope. We're learning to love her, support her, trying not to enable her to keep doing what she's doing. And we're also getting on with our own lives,
You need something that the law enforcement and maybe the schools or the community can't offer. The Learn to Cope program and programs like it can't.
Basically, what I love about the Learn to Cope meetings is it's a place of education. Where my recovery started was when my mom started to educate herself on this disease, and in turn that planted the seed for me to start educating myself.
And please don't call back until you've straightened everything out. And that was 8 months ago, and he's been perfect since.